Welcome back to her Expat Life, the YouTube channel that is dedicated to bringing female entrepreneurs, expats, and digital nomads all the information they need to make educated, informed decisions to advance their global lifestyles. And today we have back with us Natalia Ivanova from New Gen Wealth Creation, who is one of our partners or members. And she is here to help us today to unpack a little bit what happened in the BRICS summit that was held in August. For those of you that are unfamiliar with what BRICS is, we did quite a comprehensive video with Natalia a few weeks ago, which we will link in the description box at the bottom. So it's a good time to pause this video, jump onto that one if you want to catch up. What is BRICS? What does it mean for the global economy? But if you are up to date on all of that, we're going to deep dive into the summit that was held in South Africa from the 22nd to the 24th of August, 2023. Some interesting developments that have come out of the summit. And we're going to chat to Natalia about how this, or what the implications are for the global economy, and also some investment opportunities that might have come forward that maybe you would be interested in staying on top of. So Natalia, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you so much for inviting, and it's really exciting to talk about this because since last time we discussed it, so much happened on that summit, and it's really interesting to kind of compare the two, the thoughts before and after.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so let's dive straight into it, Natalia. What were the key outcomes that came out of the 2023 BRICS summit?
Yes, I have some notes here. So the one biggest outcome that everyone is talking about, it's new 6 members. So we know that BRICS is a bloc, it's a coalition of developing countries, right? And last time when we spoke, we mentioned that 40 countries were experiencing and showing the interest to join BRICS, but only 23 of them actually did formally apply, and only 6 of them were selected by original members. So it's interesting to see what countries they selected. It's Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. So these are the 6 new members. Now it's total of 11 members, and their population now combines 3.7 billion people. Wow. So that's extremely important to note because that definitely expands the power and voice of BRICS on the global arena.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's basically one of the biggest outcomes. And then they did agree, all of them. We talked a lot about this last time, about their structure. And I emphasized that they need to figure out their structure. So all of them do agree that they need to work on their architecture because there are still a lot of things to figure out. We also talked last time about their new digital currency they were talking about. And as I was saying, it's a very complicated project that they picked up. They decided to drop that project, so it's not in the cards anymore. They decided to use their local currencies and see how it goes. They will create the BRICS Bank that will help to facilitate all of the trade deals. And basically in a year, at the next summit that's supposed to be held in Russia, they will review and see, if they need to reassess the situation about how they make payments for the deals. That's another one, big one. They did touch up a little bit about the Ukraine-Russia war, but we'll talk a little bit more about this later. And then they also mentioned that it's interesting, they didn't touched up a lot about it, but I do want to talk about it later. They did talk about the United Nations Security Council, and it's interesting to see the desires and the reactions to that at the summit. So that's, I think, something very important to mention, but I guess it's not like a top outcome, but it definitely is something to look forward to. So yeah, I think this is, from my notes after reviewing everything, that's probably the main outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And definitely the biggest one that I think everybody is talking about is the inclusion of the 6 new countries. We'll just recap it again for our listeners at home. Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Okay, so Natalia, in your opinion, how will the expansion of including these new countries impact the bloc's future?
Significantly. That's extremely interesting to see that out of 23 countries, they chose these countries. When we looked at all of the countries, there's not really a lot of common things between these countries. However, it's extremely important to point out that it's a very strategic move. It's a geopolitical, geoeconomical, and geostrategic. It's very energy center oriented, Middle East oriented too. And the biggest portion of it is definitely energy. And it's important to note here that out of the original members in BRICS, only Russia is energy producing country, none of the others. So I think for the original members, it was definitely one of the biggest topic. And definitely, I think that's what was driving their selection. But again, it's, when we look at those selections, it's interesting to see that every single country has its own agenda, clearly. And it's interesting to see that they are a little bit, not on the same page. And there is a very clear winners out of the summit and the rest. So, I can definitely touch up more a little bit about the winners and all that stuff. But if you have any other questions besides to the growth.
Just a comment. Yeah, I thought it was quite interesting mentioning that each country maybe has their own, maybe not agenda, but obviously a lean or a bias or a skew as to what they would like the outcome to be. It was interesting to note which of the current BRICS countries were supporting the inclusion of certain members. So I know Brazil was championing Argentina to be part of the group that was accepted. And South Africa was vying quite seriously for Ethiopia to be part of the group. So we're seeing these kinds of countries looking to maybe affirm some support for their regions. I know South Africa really wants Africa to take more of a spotlight in this space. So yeah, maybe tap a little bit more into that. What do you think were who were some of the winners coming out of the summit?
Absolutely. So you're absolutely right. South Africa, and I really like the president mentioned a lot of interesting comments about how he does want it to be only about the free trade area, and he wants it to participate for the majority of this global South. He wanted to include more countries that actually do need help. So he was a little bit more diverse in the conversations comparing to other members. Now, the big winner, absolute, is China. It's like not even comparable how higher they benefited from this summit and they dreamed about this, Saudi Arabia, UAE, they all wanted to have a good deal, trading deals, and it's a big trader partner for them. Mm-hmm. Now, if we look at all of the trade deals that they came across and that they had already in place between these countries, each country in the BRICS partners and their main trading partner is China, but between themselves, they are not trading a lot at all. So again, it's, the summit kind of shows us that China will continue to grow, and that's a good indication for their growth. Obviously, it also impacts Saudi Arabia and UAE. Never can say it right, but it's basically those are the three big winners. China is obviously way ahead, and then the rest doesn't really shows yet the benefits for other members. And I think South Africa many times pointed that out, that we need to focus on like trading, partnering with other countries. This is not only priority, but China is happy.
Yeah. It's very clear that China is quite happy with the outcomes of the summit. Okay, we can tap on this just a little bit. I think we just discussed offline that not much was made clear about this, but what are the implications of the Russia-Ukraine war for the BRICS cooperation?
It's interesting, right? Publicly, nobody really supported Putin when it comes to the war. He did start to mention something about, how blaming West again for everything. Nobody supported him. Nobody said anything against the conflict. Brazil kind of mentioned very clearly that, we are for sovereignty and we think that everything has to be resolved by the negotiations. And then China kind of stepped in and also said that, negotiation is a priority, as Russia promised they are doing it, which they don't. So it's interesting to see nobody really stood up and nobody really kind of forced to look, we need to resolve this. And then not only the Russia-Ukraine issue that they have they also have tensions between China and India, which is also two biggest members in the BRICS. They have tensions, and they made a few public announcements that some of the areas along the border, they send the troops back, but all of the main areas, they kept the troops, and it's a lot of tension there, and nobody really wants to give in. So they have to resolve that. And they also mentioned, they were a little bit more clear on that look, we cannot fight between each other if we're doing this. However, there is no really conclusion that. And then also the other part that they're running into a lot of interesting issues when it comes to human rights. So Iran supplies military weaponry to Russia, and that also definitely doesn't align with what they outline in the BRICS declaration. So it's interesting to see they didn't really make any progress on that. They didn't really made any commitments on that either. We just need to see how it goes, because there's different ways that the BRICS can develop in the future because of those new members and the way they actually will continue to work together.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so how can BRICS countries work together to address global challenges such as climate change, poverty, and inequality? So I did read that one of the things that was a topic that was discussed quite extensively was food security, which I found quite interesting. So what have they outlined as their thoughts or strategies around addressing these key topics?
So they did address it, and they sort of kind of gave a nudge to Russia that, look, you cannot, the issue with the Ukraine, the huge issue in Ukraine, especially for South Africa and Africa in general, is the food supply. That Ukraine was a big partner, they're a huge agricultural supplier. Again, there is no commitments made, so they didn't really make any progress on commitments to improve the situation, unfortunately, even though South Africa did point it out a couple times. And then, to answer the question, how they can work together, there's so many incredible ways for them to work together, create jobs, share. But the only problem that I'm having with this is, how are they going to do it when each of the countries are so different? Their values are different, their regulations are different, their policies are different. They don't view or value same things together when it comes to businesses, shareholders. So it's very hard to actually see how they will do it. And I think South Africa is in a very tough position because of their West connections, and how their constitution is the only country that has and practices generally practicing democratic practices compared to other countries. So they a little bit stand out, and they always kind of bring the conversation back to their values, but they're only one right now. So I don't know. I honestly, to answer that question, nobody knows. We hope that they'll figure it out, but it's interesting to see how they overcome the differences that they have as country, each of them.
Mm-hmm. Especially now that they are expanding, it's going to be a true challenge, possibly with the expansion of the bloc, for sure.
Yeah.
What are the prospects for BRICS becoming a more influential force in global affairs?
It's important to mention that with the new members, it's definitely became a way more powerful voice, but it only applies right now to the reforms and agreements. It doesn't really apply to anything else. So there is nothing really happened yet that makes them a huge deal maker for the global arena when it comes to other topics besides trading topics, right? They are not a political bloc. Hopefully they will not become one, but they might, and that will be a completely different, conversation, completely different stage. And it actually will be very scary if that's ever to happen. So as of now, they don't really make any decision. And again, a lot of things were mentioned, but there is no commitments. They don't want to fight between themselves. That's why they pointed out the India-China conflict. They don't want Iran to send the military weaponry items to Russia because that's against the declaration, but then they didn't make any commitments. So it's obviously they don't want Russia to fight with Ukraine and create all the food shortage. But again, there is no commitments. And if they cannot be voice among themselves to each other, it's really hard to see them being voice to the global arena.
Mm-hmm. So they need to take care of their own affairs first in terms of internal alignment of a strategy moving forward before they can take a bigger part of the global stage. Yeah. Okay, so this is going to tie in a little bit more to your area of expertise, Natalia. So what are the specific investment opportunities that have been identified by the BRICS countries in the wake of the summit?
Well, so as I mentioned, China is the winner, and the current summit just confirmed that China will continue to grow. That's kind of a guarantee with all of those deals that their revenue will continue to expand and the country will continue to expand. Well, China already is a huge part of majority of, funds, mutual funds, ETFs, portfolios, individual and retail and commercial portfolios. So on that spectrum, majority of the people who invest most likely have some exposure to China, right? Mm-hmm. And they can continue to have that. I don't say, and I said that before, that this is not the reason having talks. We have to understand about BRICS, but right now it's not something that this is a great opportunity. We'll put a lot of money into it and then wait for it to grow. No, that's not that at all. We need to be very picky on each of them. We do need to look at particular country and companies. As I said, when we do invest in the country, most of it, we invest in the companies that prosper in that country, right? When it comes to investing in, I didn't mention it, I think, last time, but there is this very popular, not popular, but it's very known for the topic of BRICS, ETF, that invests in the assets and companies in the BRIC countries. Mm-hmm. And it's extremely important to understand that it's a very expensive ETF. It has a high expense ratio. Because it's not easy, majority of the countries in BRICS, it's not easy to invest in them. And because of the complications, obviously the expense ratio is higher because it's just more work for the fund, mutual fund or ETF to make those investments. Now, when we invest in something like this, we invest in all of it, all of the members. And here's the problem. Russia's economy is in a not good state, and it will take some time to recover. So they and other countries really underperformed over the past year, while China and India outperformed. But that's the only two countries that outperformed. Yeah. So financially speaking, it's not a good investment. And you can go, if you look at trajectory of emerging markets indices, BRIC index is way underperforming right now. Is it a good time to buy it for the future? I don't think so, because we don't know yet the future. We don't know how they will unfold. They do agree that they need to work on the structure. We do need to see how the payments will work in the local currencies. There are a lot of that spectrum too. But when it comes to investment opportunities, we need to look at those news and see how it benefits each country and then who it actually benefits within the country, and then maybe invest more picky rather than just overall BRICS.
Mm-hmm. And Natalia, with the expansion of these new nations, do these new nations bring in any investment opportunities that maybe before we haven't discussed? So we've spoken about China a little bit and the Russia's economy, but the new countries, are there maybe opportunities there, or what is your view?
Again, it's individual opportunities for each country and the companies, right? So when we talk about UAE and Saudi Arabia, those countries obviously are very energy oriented, and then you can definitely invest in energy. What it is important to understand though about investing is how safe it is to invest in developing countries, right? Mm-hmm. Let me explain a little bit how it actually works when it comes to investing for the international investor. And I think majority of our audience probably will be international investor, European or American, right? Japan. Yeah. So if we talk about those countries actually going on exchanges, European or American exchanges, they have the company, right? So let's assume there's X, Y, and Z company in South Africa. They want to go public somewhere. They go public in America, and people in America or in Europe now can buy the ticker and have the exposure to that country, to that company, right? So the local regulations, all of that implies and affects the country or the stock. So the value of the stock will be depending on the things that are happening inside the country. We know for example, China, Alibaba, everyone knows Alibaba, it's a great investment. However, because of regulations, they had so many problems.
Yeah.
Now, that's one of the reasons also why BRICS will have probably challenges working together. And that's what I mentioned earlier, because let's assume company in South Africa that used to specific regulations, specific freedom, goes to China, and China tells us you cannot do this and that.
Yeah.
It'll be hard for them to maintain the business, right? And it's harder to expand in the country with such a strict regulations if their own country is having trouble with their, regulations. So for the other businesses, it will be harder to come across. Another aspect of it, when you, as an international investor, purchasing a position that is from the emerging market, you first of all you have to keep an eye on taxes, because it will be a tax event for you. Secondly, if something were to happen, you might lose your entire investment, and that's a great example with Russia. Before they invaded in Ukraine, they have this stock, and I actually traded the IPO for that stock. Ozon, it's basically their Amazon. Amazon doesn't work there, so they have their own Amazon, which is Ozon. Ozon is a very prospering company back then in Russia. They went public in American exchanges. People started to buy the company, hoping for the country to grow. Obviously, it's logistics. Logistics are always good. Guess what? They invaded Ukraine, and all of the investments that anyone who bought $1,000 of Ozon lost it, zero. Not only they just lost it, they couldn't sell it or do anything with it. So the security is very limited when it comes to participating in foreign investments with countries who don't have clear or strong regulations that they actually follow for the businesses and shareholders. To answer your question, I kind of like devoted a little bit, but to answer your questions, you have to look at each country and each business within it, determine what do you like about it and why do you want to invest it. And while you're doing that, pay attention to how the local authorities, how the regulations, how this relationship can actually affect me, my investment, and at the end of the day, is it safe to put it in there or not?
Thank you, Natalia. That was a really good way to kind of give us more of a global perspective on how to approach this. Before we wrap up today's topic of the BRICS Summit, is there anything else you'd like to discuss? Any outcomes you'd like to dive a little bit deeper into, or any other observations that you made from the summit?
Yes. So one of the things that I mentioned about the outcomes, United Nations, they were talking about that. So the other countries, besides China, India, and Russia, they were expressing that, we want to participate, we want to join that. And Russia, China, and India did not endorse anyone for the seat. And they could do that. That will be a big step towards, combined very strong relationship between them. And they didn't do that. I think that said a lot. And I think it's something important to keep in mind. And then another thing that I did read this report of Democratic Alliance. They posted this interesting report about the values and differences between the countries. And I think this is one of the challenging aspects that the countries in the BRICS have to overcome. The human rights. 3 countries completely disregarding women human rights. Other countries in this bloc, they have rules and constitutions that are completely against that. How they gonna work together? How they gonna coexist? Another report that I saw from 2022, Sweden published a report that democratic practices all over the world significantly reduced, and the dictatorships completely started to, like right now, on the rise, and the freedom of speech shrinking as well. A lot of countries within the bloc are dictatorship.
Yeah.
And that might be a problem, especially if they will turn into the bloc that is political. And it's also, I think, it applies a lot of issues for South Africa. Right after the summit, they had protests in South Africa. It's only one country out of all 11 countries that allows public protests.
Wow.
That's it. None of them do it. And that's the only country that allows free speech and the free social media. Others have it on paper, but nobody generally practices it. So I think it's a huge challenge for South Africa to kind of figure out how they're gonna stand in it. And my fear is that they might be pushed in being this deaf negotiator if they want to keep their constitution, and that's the worst thing that could happen to them. So in a way, I think what's important to understand that these differences that each country has might affect their growth significantly, and hopefully they will find a way to overcome it rather than they will start having issues between themselves and, going into the wrong direction instead of just trading free zone, trying to figure out their own agendas.
Is there anything else that you want to touch on in terms of outcomes of the summit? Interesting things to keep an eye on? Any predictions or any feelings as to what could be coming out of everything in the future?
No, so it's interesting now to see how they will proceed with this year, what they will accomplish within this year. It's also interesting to see who else they will choose as a members in the future to add to the blog, because again, it kind of builds up this trajectory of where they will go. And right now it's so energy centric. Will they be able to expand it? Will they be able to benefit smaller members within the summit? Because again, this is great, it benefits China, but I feel like the purpose of the entire bloc originally was to benefit many developing countries of South. And right now it's just kind of stepping a little bit in a different direction. So it's interesting to see how they will continue to cooperate, because a lot of things, as I mentioned, don't really intact there. It's interesting how they will figure out the local currency too. So I think right now all we can do is watch. And by the way, American, someone asked me about that. How does America impact, looks at all of this? And they definitely watching it very closely. There is no bills passed or anything like that yet, but they are watching. And the best thing that they can do right now is to offer a better alternative to the members and to the other countries that are wanting to be part of BRICS, because they want to be heard. So there should be some different, maybe alternative from the West that, look, we are hearing you, but there are some steps and some regulations that you have to follow, and we have to work together like that, So we will see. We'll see how it goes, and we'll see how BRICS will behave towards other countries and how the West will behave.
I can't remember who released this comment or statement, but there was a statement released by somebody in a position of power in the States that basically said that they don't see BRICS as a direct threat. So, yeah, interesting to see.
It is definitely a concern, and it should be a concern for them. But I think, from my perspective, when it comes to de-dollarization, and affecting global stage, I don't think it's there yet at all. It's a lot of hype out there. We talked about this a lot. I don't think it's there. I think my only fear for BRICS is to go wrong direction, to go away from the trade bloc that they wanted initially to implement, to help smaller voices and kind of go towards whatever they need, the original members need, right? So I think that's my only fear, because a lot of the stuff that was done and discussed on this summit is more towards that rather than the original goal that they set up.
It does feel like a little bit of the geopolitical narrative is seeping into the space, and it will be very interesting, like you mentioned, to see how countries, particularly countries like South Africa, who, like you said, do have a very strong history and objective of maintaining human rights, and in a difficult position. And we already saw this when there was, just before the summit, when it was everyone was wondering whether Putin would actually go to South Africa, and South Africa was in a very difficult position to kind of say, well, because of the treaties that we have, if he steps foot into the country, then he will be able to be arrested for international war crimes. So there are a lot of dynamics that are playing out here, but I do think it is a lot of pressure, but I do think it's interesting to just bear in mind as well, like you mentioned earlier, the percentage of the global population that is represented by this group and the initial focus of this group. And I think it is quite important, like you said, that these smaller developing states do have a voice. It's just going to be interesting to see whether the big players, those more powerful within the group, if they can align maybe what their expectations are and allow those smaller groups to come forward and have a bit more say. So very interesting. We'll see how things play out. I do believe that they've scheduled the next summit to be in Russia next year. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that. Lots of developments that I think might take place. Am I correct in saying that the new countries will officially be accepted or part of BRICS as from the 1st of January 2024? Is that the official date of the expansion? Do you know about that?
I actually don't know when they will jump in and when it officially will be. They did, I think that's what I read, something like this, but I don't know if it was already stated as a fact. So I honestly don't know. They do still verify some of the, they did point it out that there is some requirements and they did not release those requirements. So nobody really knows the requirements that are available there for the other countries who applied. They really don't know why they were not accepted by others. So I don't know exact date, unfortunately, sorry for that, but I hope we can get a hold of those requirements that they created for the 6 countries that they selected, but it wasn't released yet.
Do you think they will make it public knowledge? Are they expected to, for the sake of transparency?
I hope so. I think it should be transparent. I think it should be transparent for other countries, not only the countries that applied, which I hope they do know that, but also the countries who express interest. And the only thing that still is a huge barrier in the development and growth of BRICS is that architecture that they're trying to build a platform for it. They still don't have it figured out. They do agree they need to work on it. And adding more members while they don't have it figured out, I don't think we will see a very soon addition to the block unless they will limit it to specific only like trading deals, right, or something like that, which they already expanded it into more like a science, and they expanded it to other fields as well. So it will be interesting to see. But again, I think they should release it so it's available and then the country has that knowledge. Maybe they have a way to share it between themselves. I have no idea. But it will be really great for everyone else to know what to focus on, what they want, and what is their focus on, because it's hard to understand right now what they actually trying to focus, and each member has a very different comment when they talk about their goals.
Well, I definitely hope and support the idea of transparency. So we'll keep an eye on that, and maybe we'll have a follow-up video as and when this information is released. Natalia, how can people get hold of you? How can people get in touch with you?
Instagram, LinkedIn, those are the best places, and my website, New Gen Wealth Creation. If you go to the website, you have ability to connect with me or schedule a consultation. It's a free consultation, basically, where you will be able to share your information with me, and we can see what are the best actions for you in developing your finances. LinkedIn is a great way to, especially for partners who want to work together. And Instagram is somewhere where you can get a lot of financial tips. I make videos and pictures, and I try to educate as much as possible about the modern wealth management.
Perfect. Yeah, I follow you on Instagram, and I like how fun and accessible you make the daunting topic of investing.
I try to do it between the calls, so sometimes I like do typos and stuff like but whatever. It's really fun, interesting, and the community is fun. I like the followers that I have.
Amazing. Natalia, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate your insights as always. And just a reminder to our viewers and listeners at home, members of her Expat Lives membership program do get discounts with our partners, such as Natalia, and other global partners that we have, which include co-working spaces, co-living spaces, legal firms, beauty salons, yoga studios internationally. So make sure to visit herexpatlife.com, click on the membership page, and become a member if you are not one yet, because there are great benefits to be had. as well as an app that we are going to be launching later on this year. So I can't say too much about it at the moment, but definitely keep posted on our social media platforms. Follow us on Instagram. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we will be launching this very exciting app soon that I have a feeling is going to really revolutionize the female expat space. So lots of interesting and exciting things happening. Thank you so much, Natalia. Very, very exciting. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you again for taking the time to chat to us about these very interesting developments.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure.